Sometimes things that are genuinely fine on the launch of the game with a relatively uninformed player base become massive onboarding hurdles as the average player base's knowledge increases. The slow death of StarCraft is important to remember here, where a mature, optimized game eventually became so rigidly solved that even casual play was dominated by exploitative mechanics, cheese strats, and arcane knowledge gaps. The best example I can come up with is walling your choke. Every game without fail, a new player has to wall their choke because early game rushes can happen at any point and you don't have information on what the enemy team is doing. A new player playing StarCraft has to intuit or learn from the internet or other players this technique involving holding a unit's position just to be able to play the game at its base level. This is a very important part of the game structure and shows a very direct point. Game knowledge is completely separate from raw skill, and as game knowledge scales, things which are benign can very quickly become new problems. It's not just tech ability to use your movement exploits though, even basic survival skills scale with knowledge separately to skill level. The player base is already rapidly improving at not dying simply because they now understand what the abilities do. Knowing every hero's kit, abilities, ultimates, movement, animations, and matchups is going to become an expected baseline. I could probably make a living just off producing hero strategy breakdowns and shorts. Please remember that instead of doing this, I chose to shake a hornet's nest with this video instead. That's probably some sort of reflection on my personality, come to think of it, but still, all of this is a problem. Reflecting on Overwatch, I can see the brick wall now that I've played Rivals. If you go into that game, you are expected to be able to know every ability, spacing, loads of other things, just to be able to exist in the silver rank. I think we all know that part of the fun in Rivals is because the game isn't perfect. Right now, everyone's learning together. No one knows all the tricks, so the climb feels smooth and natural, but intentionally or not, by learning, we collectively pull the ladder up behind us as a community. And Rivals is simply littered with unnecessary things that cause real problems in the game's on-ramping and learning curve. So let's ignore the balance concerns for a bit. Maybe you're one of those lunatics who thinks that egregious BS is actually a good thing to have in games instead of incredibly frustrating, and let's continue. This genre of video game, the hero-based shooter, is already possibly the most complicated genre to learn in existence. Just talking about 1v1 duels, there's 595 matchups to learn in Rivals, and that's the most simple case. While MOBAs have the same number of buttons and add extra item choices and NPCs to make up for it, they can't even come close to the complexity of cramming more players into a smaller space with a fully 3D environment, and making them all interact together at the same time. This emergent complexity from simple characters interacting in a complicated way is the reason why these games are so satisfying to me. And this goes hand in hand with the second prime rule of hero-based shooters. Don't needlessly overcomplicate stuff for no reason, it's already complicated enough. In this genre of game, every bit of extra unnecessary complexity you add to the game is a trade-off between being able to improve the experience in some way, or maybe more often being able to have new things to jingle at people to get a larger player base, and between making those players have a harder time getting into and sticking at your game in the long run. There's a reason why Deadlock doesn't have a massive player base. It's not because it's a bad game or it has bad systems, it's because it looks horribly complicated to get into. With all that in mind, we need to start talking about specifics, and I can think of no better place to start than with the overcomplicated, bloated, and boring hero kits in this game. Some of these really do have a late stage Overwatch 2 problem of just adding stuff for the sake of it. Where Overwatch uses the E button sparingly, Rivals uses E, F, and C. Some of these designs feel really insecure in their ability to work on a simple idea and implement it in a satisfying way, or fail to tie massively important elements of design into the overall kit. Magneto has a shield, a bubble, a primary fire, and a secondary fire which recharges slowly over time or fast when his bubbles are used well. This uses the concept of Zarya's bubbles and needlessly adds extra stuff to it, when the concept already had a complete design loop before this was added. Hawkeye and Hela both have two tacked on abilities which could be removed wholesale from their kit without the core gameplay loop being changed in any meaningful way. Hela is one of the more simple kits in the game, and even she has a left click which can headshot, a right click which explodes with a 0 drop off AoE after 3 seconds of wind up, an immunity escape ability with a short wind up which can be cancelled early to juke enemies, a passive that causes corpse to explode a second after with another AoE, I bet a couple of people didn't even know that existed, an orb AoE cooldown which stuns on impact and pulls enemy to the center, and slow fall. I know when listing things like this you can easily be perceived as a bit disingenuous, since all kits can be made to seem like a lot when you list it out fully. But my problem isn't that the kit has a lot of stuff, it's that the stuff isn't necessary for the kit to function or incorporated into the gameplay loop. I can clearly see the idea with her orb pulling people into the right click AoE attack and the passive ability, but what's currently incentivized and what actually happens in reality isn't that. The orb is pretty much always saved for enemies diving or to finish off low health enemies, and that's without the right click ability. The AoE pull just isn't wide enough to be useful in enough scenarios, and the right click doesn't do enough damage to be worth it aside from in ambushes. Despite the stun on the AoE being only 0.3 seconds and only doing 40 damage, that's still enough to guarantee kills and get people off you, and that's how it's used. In reality, this entire section of the kit, the passive, the right click, and the pull on the orb, could all be removed and she functionally operate the same. Invisible Woman has a pull, a shield, an AoE, a double jump, and invisibility. I could remove Invisible Woman's invisibility and she would remain the same hero. Surely that should be the starting point of the design and tied into the core of the play. Instead, it's somehow an addendum. For all everyone's hate for Sombra, at least the stealth had a reason to be there. Even when the kits aren't being inefficient or bloated, these F1 screens are a brick wall lexicon of text and pointlessly overcomplicate the kits for even simple heroes. Why is there a separate entry for quick melee on some heroes when in practice it's useless? Why is every wall climb and hover ability listed separately as abilities instead of implied by the kit? Why does Wolverine have 3 different claw attacks listed instead of meaningful distinction being made between these in the names? Why is every ultimate listed alongside the normal abilities instead of separately? Surely if anything this screen is meant to be a quick start guide, when in reality it acts more like the manual for a dishwasher. Why would you not streamline and center your hero designs around simple core concepts, and why would you not remove this needless complexity? Because the genre is already complicated enough. Which brings me to why team-ups got shuffled to the top of this script in one of the many rewrites. Generally, the way that people choose to balance this incredible level of complexity in hero-based shooters is by, and here's the point, not adding extra contextual jank into the game that may or may not exist depending on which heroes are being played. Team-ups actively break the core readability rule I told you about earlier. Every match when learning the game I had to ask myself completely unnecessary questions. What was Luna's team-up again? Is it safe to dive her or will it get me killed? Why did Squirrel Girl just delete me from full HP when last time I fought her it was fine? Why did the Spider-Man just insta-kill me? I saw a Storm dominate last game. Why does she feel weak when I play her now? I played hundreds of hours and I still have never once seen Black Widow and Hawkeye's team up. Have you? Please don't lie here. Do you know what it does? How to play around it? I do because I looked it up for this video. It seemed very powerful, but who knows? It took me 50 hours to see Moon Knight's team up, and when I finally did, I died randomly and didn't even know why. I spent the next 10 seconds trying to figure out what happened, only to realise I had no clue what I was looking at in the kill cam. How can a system be this thoughtless to the new player experience? Right now, everyone's patience is high, everything is new, and everyone is still learning, but once the community has figured out the game, new players will face an additional barrier on top of the usual skill gap. They'll be playing to catch up. This naturally leads straight into my next section, and we can slow down a little for the game show. Starting right at the bottom of the table, here we go for £100. Which of these orbs gives enemies minus 30% movement reduction and deals 40 damage when they cross the boundary? Is it A, the orb with lines around it? B, the orb which I forgot to hide the indicators, that one's pretty obvious. C, the orb with scary spiky lines coming out of it. Or D, the orb with a wavy sphere in the center. I mean, come on guys, we can't all be okay with this. I mean, what are they doing? The answers are Thor, Moon Knight, Cloak and Dagger, and Invisible Woman, but if you already knew that, that's still beside the point because this is ridiculous. Sure, this VFX issue may fall into the category of things the devs probably know about and can easily fix. I mean, I've picked the worst case scenarios here, they're all on the allied team, and the devs had to make a lot of heroes, so they'll probably just recolor a couple of them and make the effects a bit clearer. But my sympathies end when I see something like this. Which of these melee-focused heroes who slash with their claws and have gap-closing dashes is closing in on me in this picture? If you know the answer, you've definitely been playing too much Rivals and have probably already passed the event horizon of arcane knowledge, which a new person in 6 months will consider to be BS when they're forced to learn it. The question of whether this guy jumping me is Wolverine or Black Panther really brings up an important point. Marvel Rivals doesn't even try to put the bare minimum effort into maintaining standards of the genre, such as keeping a consistent hero silhouette. The point of this practice should be pretty obvious to everyone. New players shouldn't have to press the tab button or memorize skins to work out what they're facing. On some heroes, the specifics of the skins don't really matter that much because their movement, silhouette and animations are so obviously unique that it's not unreasonable for a new player to intuit who they're facing, but this is a sliding scale. This Loki skin has a big helmet and pointy staff, and I know it doesn't look that much like it here, but this is really easy for new players to mistake with Hela. If they just downsize the horns of the star flare bit, this skin would be fine. This Magneto skin doesn't really change him much, aside from giving him the same colour cape as Doctor Strange and a red, gold and black colour scheme. This one's unacceptable for me because he plays in the same place as Doctor Strange, does the same types of things as Doctor Strange, and has few massively distinct animations from Strange. I know the rings set them apart, but those rings aren't even there half the time. But on the other side, there are characters that can be changed massively without any bad problems, like the Mr. Fantastic skin, which changes everything about the appearance, and it doesn't matter at all because he's still a wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man. Some other heroes also have this massive amount of leeway. For instance, you can do basically anything with Rocket. Magic's sword is also such a big part of her visual design that she's really flexible too. Luna's hair being two-toned is a really good visual indicator and sets her apart from any other hero. But in comparison, this Punisher skin adds a collar for really no gain for the visual design, despite the fact that this small detail dominates the model. This Namor skin removes the barnacle sleeve design for really no reason, which was really nice for making the hero silhouette distinct. And that's the same with this Hawkeye skin, which removes visual distinction, and this Bucky skin, which does the same. I mean, this Blood Soldier skin for Bucky looks more visually similar to Namor than him. These two Moon Knight skins also aren't acceptable to me, since in this one his hood and armor is removed, making him look like a generic guy with few signifiers, and in this one they remove all semblance of even trying to keep consistent visual theming. I distinctly remember being confused by this Spider-Man skin, even despite this hero having probably the most visually distinct approaches to fights in the game. This skin is fun and entertaining for the boys, am I right? But there's something lost as well. If you're still doubting me here without looking at that, tell me whether this guy is Hulk or Venom, and tell me whether a new player would be able to tell. I know this whole section and probably this whole video feels like me being a stick in the mud because if anything this is a damn comic book game and the devs are, at least probably, I mean I don't know because I'm not a nerd like you, implementing skins from the books, and we want those skins to be as interesting and fun and cool as possible. But sometimes we can't have everything, and again this isn't me telling you that the game would be better if the skins were removed, but that this genre is damn hard to play and damn hard to onboard, and even if a bit of this difficulty to onboard could be mitigated by, for instance, keeping some consistent visual features in the silhouettes of heroes, and the devs chose not to do that for really no reason, that is a failing. Sorry guys, one sec. Go away, what do you want? Sorry? You say there's an entire system of abilities with long cooldowns that completely break the standard industry practice of making things readable for no good reason? For God's sake. Okay, so before I go on to Strange Portal and really incite the mob, there's more than a couple of long cooldown abilities in Marvel Rivals. So let's start with a couple of non-heavy hitters where I might be able to get the thin end of the wedge under before my DMs end up filled with threats. Having multiple minute-long cooldowns in your game is a bad idea. This isn't innovative gameplay that increases diversity, it's something that had been carefully measured and considered by other games and then purposely not created or removed from them, because it's a bad idea. Wolverine is a tank-hating diver who deals percentage-based damage, increasing with a rage meter that builds as he lands hits with abilities. His gameplay loop revolves around a dash with gap closes, and a leap which kidnaps enemies and empowers his melee to murder them over the next couple of seconds. He's probably the worst designed hero in the game. Tank hate is a dead end of hero design. It has always been a dead end of hero design. It doesn't work. It never has worked. It's never failed to cause problems. Squirrel Girl definitely has a large amount of this, but Wolverine is the worst type of this design I've ever seen. Wolverine has a passive that grants him a second life upon death. He gains between 150 to 300 overhealth based on his rage, purges debuffs, and then after 3 seconds converts that overhealth into normal health while removing his rage and scaling his damage back down. Here's the question: you're coming back from spawn and Wolverine jumps onto someone with high rage, do you shoot him or not? Well, my friend, depending on whether he has an extra life or not, the person he's targeting is either guaranteed to be dead regardless of your help, or very likely to survive if you decide to damage him. All of this hinges on the status of one ability's cooldown. With everyone naturally making different decisions, Wolverine often gets a kill and survives even when his extra life ability isn't active. Until a new player checks his kit, Wolverine will seemingly randomly gain massive overhealth, and even once they understand the ability, they won't have the skill to track when the passive was last used and whether it's off cooldown. For a new player, this is completely arcane knowledge on the level of the Invisible Moon Knight team up. From their perspective, they're being randomly killed arbitrarily by someone they sometimes can't fight off, with no way of knowing which state of the fight they're in. But the thing you probably didn't know until I pointed out here is that it actually is a visual indicator for this ability. Possibly the most important thing to have front and center in VFX is here, a tiny, almost invisible shield icon which can barely be seen in the melee with all the other VFX going on. This obviously needs to be clearer. They could add a glow or something to indicate when the ability is active, though I'm not sure that would be appropriate since his rage meter already makes him glow. Still, the problem is fixable if the devs know or care to address it. But even if they do, this doesn't solve the other issue. Long cooldowns imply significant effects when they're used, and when they're usable off the mark, these heroes become significantly stronger at the start of a fight and much weaker afterwards. Rocket's revive, Stranger's teleport, Adam Warlock's res, team up reses, all of these front load a lot of power into the start of fights. One of the worst examples of these in my opinion is Rocket Raccoon's BRB or personal res. Rocket is a terribly designed hero off the bat. I'd give him a 3 out of 10. He's got 3 wall climbing and 2 dashes combined with a short range minigun, which is kind of like the get off me ability. This is fine, but with vertical movement comes the implication, weirdly enough, that Rocket should stand somewhere high occasionally, which is poorly paired with the fact that he's short enough that shooting down off any surface almost always causes his shots to miss, going off into nowhere. His ultimate is Orisa Bongo from Overwatch, considered one of the most boring ultimates in that game, so much so that it was actually removed, but the rivals team made it worse by giving it a health bar so large that positioning the beacon doesn't really matter. It can really even be placed inside the enemy team, they're only really wasting their time trying to destroy it. His jump packs theoretically add some extra versatility to positioning, but in practice the best use for them is to save them for dive attempts and Rocket, that's a good joke, out of range as soon as the diver engages. You might ask, how would a diver know this is a possibility when choosing a target? Well, they don't. Whether they have a jump pack or not massively affects your decision making, and yet there's no VFX to suggest whether they have one. It's also such a rare occurrence that somebody actually saves a jump pack for any period of time that you can't reasonably assume that somebody would have one just because they have a rocket on their team. I know barely anyone uses rocket packs, so this interaction doesn't really happen very often, but can we all just admit that this is bad? Then there's the BRB, a significantly worse implementation of one of the most problematic abilities ever released to Overwatch. It's a deployable which generates armor packs and jump packs on a regular cooldown and instantly resurrects the first person to die in a 50-meter radius and then goes on a 45-second cooldown. Denying the first pick in a team fight is always incredibly powerful because it typically secures a huge win rate advantage. This ability is a strong front-loaded power boost. At lower levels it stops random deaths caused by poor decisions, and at higher levels it gives a huge advantage in solo duels where players can unload their entire kit on an angle without worrying about escape, as a res is guaranteed. This res, by itself, is more powerful than half the ultimates in the game. It's probably more powerful than Mantis' ult. It's really good. Overwatch's version, Mercy's reworked solo target res, at least requires her to use mobility, hitbox manipulation and her slow fall to complete an animation before the res. BRB on the other hand takes almost no skill to use and can be easily invalidated entirely by flankers, making its impact highly variable. Mercy's res obviously also has major issues. In long range duels or sniper fights the requirement for location based resing was removed because there's no way to deny it, and in close range fights with tanks or DPS the res becomes useless because you can't use it without dying. This creates a significant power disparity depending on the team composition. BRB can be less annoying in sniper duels as the sniper loses positioning when revived by the beacon, which can't really be placed just anywhere due to the risk of it being killed. However, the beacon is much more regularly used in typical fights where tanks, melee DPS or ranged DPS are engaged in close combat. Theoretically, the 50-meter range limitation makes it unusable at extreme ranges and requires thoughtful placement decisions. In practice, however, the 50-meter range is often more of an annoyance. Exactly how far is 50 meters anyway? How am I supposed to make a choice based off of this when I don't even know if DPS are in range or out of range? Theoretically, the ability for enemies to destroy BRB adds strategic depth to its placement. In practice, however, the option to cancel it manually and regain it on a 5-second cooldown removes almost all of that decision making. May I also mention here that incentivizing Rocket to hide his BRB also incentivizes him to hide the armor packs and jump packs, meaning that this addendum to his kit is basically only used out of spawn, and the health from the packs is so minimal and the game involves so much trading HP that they may as well not exist in the first place. Instead of being a core part of the kit, they're just more tacked on stuff. Again, first pick denial is such an incredibly large advantage, bordering on ridiculous, and having this up every fight is only not currently being yelled at as a massive issue because the entire video game is a boring long-range poking war with every fight decided by ultimates due to the ridiculously high sustain and aggressive play denial available in every kit. Oops, sorry, math slip there, let's put that back on. This implementation is boring, frustrating, requires almost no skill, and worst of all, the problems are baked into the kit as a core part of its power budget. Okay, we've done 2 now, let's get the 3rd done and let's get people angry. Stranger's Portal drops 2 circles, connects them into a portal, and temporarily crashes your graphics card. I may as well say here that I don't think this ability is the tech success people seem to think it is. Sure, it's cool as hell that things like this exist in a multiplayer game, but I think the people praising this don't remember that we've already kind of had this before. That's not to downplay the difficulty of getting this to work, I'm not a designer, but I did watch a video series on how to make these, and it seemed to me that it's not quite as much of an impossible task as some people are making out. I think the best improvements to tech this represents is probably being able to have this angled and being able to put semi-permanent objects through it, such as Punisher's grappling hook. In all other ways, it's really not the success people think it is. I don't know how people seem to not be aware that this thing simply does not work properly with the sound system. I've never heard anyone criticize this, but things on the other side of the portal are muted, and this includes stuff like alt voice lines. For a game which relies so much on sound for readability, this is unacceptable. The portal is also a little bit janky. There's a lot of terrain flashes when you go through it. If your camera's outside of it, it doesn't render the other side of the opposite portal. I don't know how many of these little things are purposely not improved due to graphics capabilities, but I feel like there's a lot of things with this portal that just aren't working quite how they should be. We're of course talking about this because the portal is another one of those long, front-loaded, high-power abilities. The devs have already solved a couple of issues. First, you couldn't let people swap to Strange mid-match to generate more portals, that's a no-go, so they implemented a shared team cooldown. Secondly, this is a huge effect, and if players didn't know when it was active, it would be a disaster. There's almost no reaction time, especially when people teleport directly on top of you. So what's the solution? Make it loud as hell, distinct, and add a specific ping so players are instantly aware. That brings us to where we are now, but there's still some unavoidable problems left over. Teleport is absurdly strong when used right out the gate to flip certain maps. It's one of the biggest reasons for Stranger's high win rate. Right now it's fun, but eventually this will need fixing. One simple adjustment is to start the cooldown when the spawn doors open. It doesn't even need to be the full 3 minutes, something like 60 seconds would stop every round from becoming a guaranteed map flip. Another issue is swapping to Strange just to contest an objective. In Rivals, you maintain 50% of your ult charge when switching, meaning that if you die first in a team fight, swapping to Strange and teleporting back to the point is actually a no-brainer. It's an easy, zero-risk play, and I can already seeing it becoming the standard over the next few months. Do we really want this much power available right away? Simple fix: add a cooldown timer when switching to Strange mid-match, just like at the start of the game. Right now, the ability passively regens, which feels a little dull. Maybe it should charge faster when Strange is performing well, kinda like how Wolverine gets their cooldown refunded on kills. But tying it to limbs does feel a little awkward, right? Maybe a better alternative is to make it regen faster based on damage or healing output instead. And that cooldown meter feels a bit unclear when tracking such a long ability. Instead of showing the time remaining, maybe instead we should make it work like an energy bar and charge from 0 to 100. And since this ability has such a big impact, why not give it a special name instead of just calling it a regular ability? Tee-hee. Strange is so strong because his base kit is already complete, yet he also has what is effectively 2 ultimates stacked on top of each other. And to make things worse, his ultimates combo into each other, requiring very little skill or setup once you learn how to do it. This isn't just a high rank or competitive issue. These abilities directly hurt new player onboarding once the game stabilizes, and they disrupt the normal match flow. Even in low ranks, knowledge checks like swap to Strange to contest or Strange is really good at the start are becoming common already. Strategies like this do not require skill, just a YouTube video explaining them, and because they're so easy to learn, they spread to lower ranks faster than actual game sense does. The only way to account for these is to adjust the total power level of the hero to purposely make them weak without the power spike. This is ridiculous. What are we doing here? Long cooldowns do not belong in the game. They're only interesting because they're new. It's just the devs jingling their keys in front of your face.